Okay, a couple of people have asked me to show how I make colour palettes in Procreate. So this is just a little video to show you how to do it. I'm going to show you how I use my Copic colour palette to how I import it into my pictures, but also I'm going to show you how to make a colour palette using the Procreate colour palettes just by importing a watercolour chart from the internet. So I'll start off by showing how I use my own colour palette. So I just open a picture. So I go into Procreate and just add a, oh, I'm in the wrong one. Go into Procreate and just open an empty canvas, and then actually I'll go out and show you before I do that. So in my files in Procreate, sorry, not in Procreate, in my files on my iPad, I've got a specific folder. So this is just in my files. I've got a folder in my iCloud drive which is just full of Procreate stuff. And in this folder, you can see here I've got 3 Copic colour charts. So there's one which I got from Bardo brushes. So if you buy the Copycat markers from Bardo brushes, I'll put the link in. If I love Lisa Bardo's brushes, and I bought her Copic markers. And if you buy her Copic markers for Procreate, you get these Copic colour charts. But you can make your own. You don't have to use these. You can make your own, but you get these with them. So I use these. So you get 3. You get one that's in that orientation. You get a long one. This is the one I use all the time, this shape one. And you get a really long thin one. So if you're doing a landscape image, you can use that one right across the top of the image. So I just keep those in my files. So then when I'm in Procreate and I'm working on a, before I begin, I open the file. And then I usually start by just sketching out my image. And once I've, say I'm sketching out an image of some sort, I need my pencil. Oh, it helps if I've got something going. So say I'm sketching out an image. As soon as I've got anything on paper, I create a layer on top. This is always my top layer. So no matter what happens, my top layer, as soon as I've started the layer, I go over here into Add, insert a file, and it automatically opens this file because this is the one that I always use. And I usually use that one. So I add this file, and obviously I don't want it to cover my whole image, so I reduce it. I make it quite small and I put it up there. And what I usually do, so I always do this after I've drawn my face, because if I go back down to this layer, so I draw my face first. So I draw a face, and then what I do is I make sure it's just outside the face. And what I sometimes do as well, once I've got it there, is I just erase that corner because it gets in my way. So I'll erase the bottom corner, and then what I tend to do is make it so it just is on the edge of the face. So it's as big as I can get it without interfering with my face. And then once it's there, you can go back to your bottom layers and just colour pick from it for whatever colour you want. So I then just colour pick all my colours. Sometimes you have to make sure that you then go back into your other layers so you're not drawing on that layer. Because you want to be able at the end to simply delete that layer and not be deleting part of your artwork. So it's really important. So what you can do is which I never do, but you can do, once you've got it there, is just, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. Just look, oh, sorry. Once it's there, you can just lock it. So then it's there and you can't draw on it. Then you have to unlock it at the end before you delete it. But you're literally just adding then your colour chart. If that seems too complicated for you, but once you've done it a few times, it just becomes second nature. I just do it every time, and that's always how I colour pick. And then I never really have to go into palettes. The only time I do sometimes do this just to get a slightly lighter or a slightly darker colour. And I do it to get black and white because it's easier to just go and get black and white from there. For those of you who are new to Procreate, you might not know that if you just tap on anything, it'll automatically go to black at the bottom, or if you tap up there, it'll automatically go to white. So that's easier than trying to find it on there. So you can just get your black and whites, and I'll use that to just get slightly different shades. But otherwise, I always pick my colours from there. So you could do that with any palette that you like. So say you always, if you're someone who generally uses, I don't know, Daniel Smith watercolours, you could just go and get the Daniel Smith watercolour palette and import it into your top layer, and then just reduce it really small and colour pick from the Daniel Smith water palette. But there is another way of doing it. So that's, if I delete all of those. Oh, sorry, I need to unlock it first and then delete it. If I clear that layer, clear. So if you don't want to do that, you can make your own palettes. So what I did earlier is I saved a watercolour palette. So I saved the Schminker. I went to the Schminker website and just took a photo. I just took a screenshot of their watercolour palette. Now to do this, I could just fit it to screen, make it really large. So I've now got their watercolour palette here, or part of it. So you can import, you could do this with anything. So you could go to, if you like, I don't know, Derwent watercolour pencils, you could go to the Derwent website. All the websites have their palettes on them. So you just go to the website, screenshot the palette, and then insert it into a canvas as a screenshot, as a photo. And then if you go to the top here and go to palettes, if you click this plus button, you can create a new palette. So it gives you a new untitled palette. So I could then name that Horadam, which is Schminker basically. So I give it the name Horadam, and then what I'm going to do is just make the palette. So you use your colour picker. I'm not going to bother with the whites. So I've then picked the first colour and I've added it to my palette. And then you're going to pick the second colour. And then if you click on, if you just tap up there, it'll open the palette again. And you just pick each colour. And you just go to the colour picker and you can go, ooh, I'm not sure if I'll actually pick that one. And then just tap on that to open it again. And you can add each colour to your palette. So you can then create your own palette. So I used to do this with my Copics. So I'll show you. I have. So you can just carry on and you can put, and as each, I think they only take 3 lines of colours. So you'd have to have a Horadam 1, you might call it yellows and oranges, and then a Horadam 2, which would be pinks and blues, and you can create your Horadams. So somewhere here I've got Copic, I've got all my Copics. I might have got rid of them. Oh, yeah, I think I got rid of them. So I used to have in here, I used to have Copics 1s, Copics blues, Copics pinks, Copics reds. And then when I realised I could just colour pick in the canvas, I got rid of them because they were just, I just had hundreds of Copic palettes. So I got rid of them. And these were other ones that I created. The way I found these palettes was the other thing that I did, which I wasn't going to show you, but I can. Another interesting way of creating palettes, if you go out of here, sorry, go out, was in Pinterest. So I don't know if any of you have Pinterest, but in Pinterest I have boards and boards and boards of colour combinations. So this is another interesting way of making palettes. So you go into colour combinations, and just, if you go into Pinterest and just put in colour combos, or you can go and find my palettes, I've got hundreds. So sometimes if I'm just looking for a 5 colour palette, just go into Pinterest and just put in colour combos, and you'll find all these 5 colour palettes. So this is how, if I just want a 5 colour palette for something, I just go into Pinterest and look up colour combos, and then I go through, well, now I just go through mine. But these are lots of my interesting colour palettes. come from Wes Anderson film colour palettes, because I like Wes Anderson. So you can go and you can find, if you go and look for colour palettes, you'll find really interesting ones. So lots of my bigger colour palettes come from, mostly from films. So I don't know if I've got those. They might be in a different, because I've got a colour film. Yeah, I think they might be. These are all my 5 colour ones. So for a while I did lots of portraits just using 5 colour palettes. So, and even some of these where there's 7, I just knocked out 2 of the colours, the ones I like the least, and just made the 5 colour palettes from them. So you can just create a Pinterest board of colour combinations, and you're welcome to go and find mine and steal them. But I have another one. It's probably in my film, which I might have called something else, because I've got lots of whenever I think of something new, I just make it. Yeah, here it is. So most of my colour palettes come from cinema ones, the bigger colour palettes. So they're named after different cinema palettes. This was my daughter who got me onto this, because she's a filmmaker. So most of them are named after films. So I literally imported these into Procreate and then picked the colours off and made the palettes. So where I have larger palettes, they come from these. So you can just go and look for, just put in cinema palettes and it'll come up with hundreds of them. And then, like, that one is a lovely one. I think it is anyway, and I like that one as well. So if I'm looking for something bigger, I just go and look for these and then just pick the colours off them in exactly the same way as I just did. So you just import one, screenshot these. Screenshot, so if you open it, like say you like that one, just take a screenshot, cut it down. So you take, I'll show you. Rather than explaining it, I'll show you how to do it. Oh, I've just shut it off instead of screenshotting it. That happens all the time. This is the new iPad Pro, and it's much more difficult to take a screenshot than on the old one, because the buttons are really hard to access. Yeah, I did it right that time. So then you just take a screenshot, cut it down so you haven't got all the other bits in there. Oh, I don't want all the other bits. Done. Save to photos. And then if I go back into Procreate, I can clear that. Or clear layer. Insert a file. Oh no, I don't want to insert a file, I want to insert a photo. Done the wrong thing. So insert a photo. Oh. Sorry, that's a message from my daughter. Insert a photo, and then you can just make a new palette. So you go here. I've got one here that's untitled, so I'll call that Budapest. So give it a name, and then just colour pick. So I suppose I should have said this is the colour picker. It's not working all the time. So there are different ways of using the colour picker. How you use it depends on how your iPad is set up. I'll show you in a minute how you make sure that that's set up to suit you. I've set mine up so that that colour picker works when I touch it with my pencil. But yours might be set up differently. It's because you can set it up in different ways. So this is how I set it up. I'll show you. So there, now I've got my palette, and then you can just clear it. You can just delete it. Clear. So how your colour picker works, if you go into basically that wrench is all your kind of tools of any sort. So all the adds are under the first action. All your preferences, I'll just go through them, because if you're quite new to Procreate, you might not know. So all your inserting and cutting, I never really use the cut or copy, but all your inserting is important. And they've just added, the add text is really new, and the add text is great. You can do all kinds of things with that. It's really fabulous. Maybe later I'll make a different film about how to do that. Sorry, I'm getting messages from my daughter. Adjustments, that is other things. So opacity, you can change the colour. So if you finished a picture and you really don't like it, you can fiddle around with the colour, which is really cool. I do this all the time. You can make, so you can say you've done something in blue, and you decide you don't like it, you can totally change the colour. And those are just really fun to play with, because you can always reset it if you don't like what you've done. That's the selection tool. So if you want to move something, that comes in useful. And that's the move tool there. But I was going to go through these ones. So yeah. So go back to where I was. That's for cropping. When you finish something, you can crop it. That's a new addition, which is really useful as well. Sharing video. But what I wanted to show you was preferences. So your colour picker is under the gesture controls. So the other things are just self-explanatory, really. You can just change it. So the most important one is so you can have the background white if you don't like the dark. I periodically change it and then decide I don't like it and go back. That's the most important one if you're left-handed. You can change it. So that should have moved that to the other side, but it didn't. But it will. You can change it so that this is on the other side. I'm trying to remember what... Oh, yeah. I don't know what that does, actually. Project Canvas, she's saying. Don't know what that does. Don't know. I'll have to go and play with it. And you can change the speed at which things happen. And the selection mask. I don't really like the selection mask, so I don't use it very often. And that's connecting styluses other than Apple Pencil. That's the pressure. So if you find that you don't like how hard you have to press, you can change it. So I'm quite happy with it, but you can change it so that it's more or less sensitive to your touch if you have an Apple Pencil. But these are the most important things. So last week, someone was asking me why, when they made a shape, it kept making straight lines or circles or squares. That's the quick shape, and you can turn it off if that annoys you. Sorry, I'm just going to shut my dog up. Joey. But the most important thing, sorry, he's not shutting up, is the eyedropper. So you can change it. So if you want it to work on a tap, I've actually still got all these. I thought I'd disabled all these, but I haven't. So, but this is the one that I really use, the Touch plus the Apple Pencil. But you can change all of these so that it works when you do different things. And I have in the past changed them. That must have been on my last iPad. So I think at one point I had it so it only worked with the pencil and it didn't work with all the other options. Because sometimes it would happen when I didn't want it to. But you can also make it work slower or quicker. And if you haven't seen any of these gesture controls before, it's worth going and having a look and seeing that you can change some things to work differently. But anyway, that's where they are, and you can change them and fiddle around with them. And to get rid of that, you just touch anywhere. So that was a quick tour, and the help will take you to the most importantly, the board. Where's the board? Oh, is it not on here anymore? I don't think it's on here anymore. It used to take you to the forum, where people would answer, all sorts of people would answer your questions. The Procreate forum, but it doesn't anymore. Unless that takes you, that may take you. Oh no, that takes you to videos. Oh, there we are. That takes you to all kind of videos on how to do things. I didn't know that was there either. It used to take you to a forum where you could ask questions and other people using Procreate would answer your questions. But now it takes you to videos showing you how to do things in Procreate. So that's quite cool. Oh, I'm really interested now. Sorry, I'm going to stop there because I've shown you what I meant to show you and I'm going off onto other things. Anyway, so I hope that was helpful, and yeah, I just hope that was helpful.